In today's episode, I talk about fearing the infamous Noodler's Baystate Blue, whether you should buy a Lamy 2000 Black Amber or a Visconti Homo Sapiens, and what I am doing to address the aging fountain pen community. What's up, folks? It's Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and this is episode number 164 of Goulet Q&A. It's gonna be a pretty good one today. I feel like it's gonna be good. I don't know. I feel like maybe I shouldn't make a statement like that right at the beginning. It'd be easier if I shot this intro portion after I've done the whole thing, so I know how well it's gone. But I don't know. I'm just calling it. I'll be like Babe Ruth pointing the bat. You know, like, yeah, I'm gonna hit a home run today. So I'm gonna start off. I'm thirsty. I'm gonna drink some water. Just chill for a sec. On the personal front, I had my in-laws visiting last weekend. That went really well. Got really good family relations on both sides, so that's always cool. Got to take my daughter to a birthday party for her fifth year friend, 5-year-old friend. I'm not to a strong start. And that was very entertaining. There were like 18 kids there, and it was complete chaos, and it was a blast. So that was kind of fun. She had a blast there. Lots of singing for me and Rachel in the choir this week. We belong to our church choir, and this is Easter, Holy Week, and all that. So I think we're going to be singing in 5 different services over 8 days. So pretty intense for us on the personal front, but we love singing. That's how we met. So it's a fun time for us. Our kids have been having Easter egg hunts like all over the place at various schools and after school care and all that kind of stuff. So they've been having a blast. It was so sad. We took Rachel to a doctor's appointment this morning, and she was supposed to have an Easter egg hunt, and we got there just as it had finished, and she was a complete wreck. But all of her little 5-year-old friends came up and gave her eggs out of their basket, and some of them were like, "This is my favorite color, Ellie, you can have it." It was the most adorable thing I think I have ever seen. Just pure, absolute innocence. That was just the best. The kids are just such a fun age and very exhausting age right now, but it's a lot of fun. So that's kind of been my life. And then, you know, on the business front here with the pen stuff, so we had the Lamy Petrol launch that happened last week. Did not get adequate stock. We knew we're not going to get adequate stock, so definitely sold out of a bunch of it. We're going to be okay on mediums. We're getting restocked on mediums actually really soon, so I doubt we'll be out of those, but the rest of them, not so much. We did get the TWSBI VAC 700R in, which I talked about last week. I think most of those have came and gone, but you know, we'll get restocked on those. I kind of warned you about that. The Traveler's Notebook in olive, which I actually have that here, so I can at least show you a little bit. I can't remember if I showed it last week. I tend to block my own memory out. I think I did show it. I think I did, but nice olive color here. We definitely did not get enough of these. Sold out in 4 minutes. That was a little crazy. I don't know when we're getting more. Wish I did, but I'll let you know when we do. And then we launched Monteverde Mountains of the World this week, some new colors, so that's pretty cool. I'm excited about those. The Aurora 88 Nebulosa we did in the last week too, so that was actually surprisingly popular. I mean, not surprisingly, but you know, a pen that expensive, you never really know how it's going to do. But it's been pretty popular, so that's been pretty cool. And you know, we're going to try to keep a good stock of those. We didn't get all the nib sizes and all the quantities we want. I swear, this year has just been like the year of not being able to get things for all kinds of various reasons. Sometimes it's manufacturing issues, sometimes it's distribution issues, sometimes crazy things are happening in transit and stuff like that. It's just been weird. So, you know, I apologize. It's just been, it's been a year. We are having a Jinhao buy one, get one going on right now. So be sure to check out our site on that. We have it displayed fairly prominently. So you can check that out if you want to get a deal on a Jinhao or two. It's pretty cool. Some stuff that we have coming soon is the Aurora 88, the limited edition one with the flex nib. So we had the blue one that's sold in like 24 hours. So we knew that was going to come and go. So the next one is in red. That's going to be coming soon. I don't know exactly when, but maybe sometime in the next week or so. So kind of be ready for that if you're interested. They're going to be coming out with some subsequent colors, but maybe like one color every 3 to 4 weeks, something like that. So be ready for that. If the red one is appealing to you, I would recommend you check it out and don't wait too long. The Aurora Optima Rosa. So this is a hot red color in the Aurora Optima. Nice, not flexible nib, but a nice 14 karat nib, so check that one out if you're interested. And then Conklin Mini Graph. This is a tiny little pen, little pocket pen. It's about the size of a Kaweco Sport. So those we're gonna have here, I believe somewhere in the next week we can have something like that. So those will be coming. Actually, a surprising number of people interested in those. So we got pretty good stock. I'm very interested to you know, get going on those, so you'll have to check those out. And then we got all the various things that are in the works. Did get restocked on the Premier C glasses too, so if you've been interested in those, we always try to keep a good stock of those, but we never know how it's going to do right off the gate, and we got to, you know, wait for the grades to manufacture those. So we got restocked on those, and hopefully we'll be pretty smooth sailing from here on out. All right, let's get into the questions for this week, shall we? Starting out with some pen and writing questions. Well, just one actually in this category this week. This is from drjfrs on Instagram. drjfrs on Instagram. I'm torn between getting the Lamy 2000 and the 50th anniversary fountain pen, so that would be the Black Amber, and the Visconti Homo Sapiens Oversize fountain pen, and the Visconti Homo Sapiens Midi fountain pen. Any suggestions on how to go about choosing one over the other? This is a tough call. These are all pretty solid pens. The first one that I would kind of rule out is the Homo Sapiens Midi. It's just not my pen. I like the larger size. I like the vacuum power filler. I like that better. I like the larger nib. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the Homo Sapiens Midi, and actually, I think I heard word that they may come out with a bronze Midi too, which is pretty exciting. But the oversized one is really the one for me. You know, the ink capacity on the Midi is a lot smaller, and the pen overall is a lot smaller, but, you know, I know a lot of people who like that one better too. So, you know, it could really go either way. So I like the oversized one, so I'll just rule out the Midi because you asked me, and I'm giving you my opinion. The Black Amber, though, so it's a Lamy 2000. I am a huge fan of the Lamy 2000. I really am. And the Black Amber, I think, looks really slick. I dig the polished clip, even though it stays smeared like all the time because it's a polished metal. Aside from that, I do feel like you're paying a lot of a premium for the limited aspect of it. You know, the finish is expensive, the polishing and all that kind of stuff. I get it. You know, they're numbered. They only made 5,000 of them worldwide. And so once they're gone, they're gone. So that's definitely got that going for it, is if you like the collectability kind of limited aspect of it. Once these are gone, it's going to be a lot harder to find them, and then they're probably going to go up in price, though you never know how that's going to go. With 5,000 worldwide, I don't know, that's not a ton, but it might be enough where in the onset, people may have used pens that they would want to sell, or new old stock or something like that, but eventually longer term, I think they would go up in price. Lamy has not done a lot of special things with the 2000 over the 50 years it's been around, so I do think that there's something to be taken into account for that. With this one, it's definitely a different writing experience than the Macrolon one. The first thing I will say is we bought a boatload of these Black Ambers, and we did not know how long we would have them. We still have them, and we were able to kind of work out a special buy one get one deal, and have the ability to do that with Lamy. So we didn't get a special deal on it. We're just choosing to do the deal. So we are offering now, at least through the end of April, where you can buy a Black Amber and get a Macrolon for free along with it. So that's pretty cool. So with that in mind, you're getting 2 for 1 kind of thing versus, you know, a single pen. And of course, the oversized Homo Sapiens is even a little bit more than just the Black Amber is. So that is something to be taken into account for sure. The thing about both pens, neither of them have an ink window. The ink window on the Macrolon version is really nice, but they do not have that on the Black Amber. So that's a tough call there. Both pens are reliable writers. I will say that when I'm using them, I tend to get a little more ink that kind of like, well, I carry the Homo Sapiens in my pocket all day long. I'm a very warm person. I move around a lot, so I definitely get some ink that comes out of the feed and stuff and gets into my cap and can get on my grip a little bit. It happens with a lot of different pens, but I run into that less with the Lamy 2000, just in general, partly because of that hooded nib, and I think it's just the design of it, and there's just not as much ink to come out of there. So I think the Lamy 2000 is a great carry-around pen, but at the same time, the thing that I really don't like about the black amber as a carry-around pen is when you have it clipped on, the weight of the body can make it so that it wants to disconnect. It's just a heavy pen. It runs into that. It's a snap cap. I'm not as crazy about that. It's not an issue I run into with the Macrolon, but it's on the black amber. It's got to be taken into account. So I only carry this inside like a pen pouch or a pen case or something like that. That's the only time that I will use the black amber. I don't like just clip this to my shirt or something like that. The Homo Sapiens, I'll do that every now and then, but even that I carry around in my own pen sleeve and stuff like that. So for me, what I have both pens, and what I actually end up using more is my Homo Sapiens. So that's sort of my answer right there, just based on use, if that's how you want to use it. But I could also see, if you're looking for more of the limited collectible aspect of it, that the black amber would be the way to go, especially because you could keep the black amber in the box and kind of set it aside and use it on special occasions or more of a desk pen, and then you could carry around the Macrolon version with you as well. So I think depending on your use and what you're going for, you can make your own decision, but that is my thought on the matter. Cool. All right, as far as ink goes, I actually do have a couple of ink questions this week. First one, this is from Weeksy98 on Instagram. Hey Brian, I read the manufacturer's guide to a few of my pens. I got really bored, okay? I get it. And I noticed that they always seem to recommend that you use only their inks because their formulation is meant to be optimized in the pen. I'm not going to restrict myself to one brand of ink, no matter what the manufacturer says. I love that spirit. But do you think that there's actually something in the idea that a manufacturer's ink will work better in their pens than others? Loving the Q&A. Okay, cool. Well, I've talked about this before, so I hesitated about taking this question at all because I didn't want to just straight up duplicate what I've already talked about. So forgive me if I'm repeating myself. I may have said it something like 75 Q&As ago. Even I have a hard time remembering all of them at this point. So I figured it's been a while since I've answered anything like this, so I'll probably have a fresh take on it just because it's been a while. So it's not super uncommon for manufacturers to have this in there. The way that I look at it is it's just like when you buy a car and they tell you to only take your car to the authorized dealer and only use official authorized parts and only to put in a certain brand of motor oil and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so the reason that they say all that stuff is not because their ink will actually perform the best in the world inside those pens. That's a very personal and a very subjective statement to make. So it's not so much that it's optimized to perform in there. What they are saying there is that in terms of warranty coverage and in predictability on their part of knowing how an ink is going to have long-term effects on their specific pen, they can predict what's going to happen and they know that their ink is safe to be used in that pen. They can't make a declarative statement about all ink brands and types and formulations and how it will behave in their pen because they can't control any of that. So most manufacturers are just going to have a blanket statement to say, if you want to have proper warranty coverage and ensure that your pen is going to perform optimally, meaning predictably how they intended to manufacture it, you should use their inks because that's the official authorized brand, right? Which makes sense. That said, there are some kind of fringe inks that are pushing the envelope in certain chemical makeups and properties and things like that. You get into that with certain permanent inks, you get into that with things like iron gall, you get into that with some of the Shimmertastic inks. It's just not conventional inks. It's not necessarily that they're going to cause harm to your pen, but they may have some less than predictable characteristics in certain pens because the manufacturers are not testing every single possible brand and type of ink when they're making these pens. They're going to test their ink. Make sense? With the exception of maybe a couple of brands who may not have their own ink. Then they just kind of make it to whatever kind of common standards there may be using some other major pen manufacturer's brand as kind of their test. So I don't think that you need to be like super paranoid and concerned about it. I think you need to be aware of it and understand that if you are putting some custom mix formulation of some concoction that you've come up with and you can't describe it and it does something crazy in your pen and you send it in to them for repair and they come back with, well, we're going to charge you for repair services now instead of covering it under warranty because you put some crazy formulation in your pen and we told you not to. That is going to be where that statement comes into play. So it's a calculated risk that you, as the owner of your pen, that you can do whatever you want with now. You can do whatever you want, but you can't do whatever you want and then expect the manufacturer to fix it for free if it does some kind of unforeseen behavior that comes out of the result of whatever you've done. You know, it's just like if you buy a pen and you run over it with your truck, it doesn't mean that they're going to cover that under warranty, because that's not something that they built that thing to be able to handle. That makes sense? Same kind of thing, very different, you know, but similar concept. I think that, you know, in general, when you're sticking with pretty much any major pen manufacturer's brand of ink, that's really a safe way to go. Usually, you know, I don't see gobs of problems with pens with ink harming pens. I really don't. You read about it online. I've been reading about it since before I even used my first fountain pen. People were talking about how fearful they are of certain things, and Baystate Blue is one of them, and I'm going to be talking about that next. And that's just something that tends to get spread like wildfire on the internet, is anybody that has a potential problem that goes on. It's not always the ink, sometimes it's the pen, sometimes it's the combination of the two, and sometimes it's other factors that are involved. So it's hard to make a declarative statement. There are definitely some you know, dipmeisters and some other kind of more professional people that will kind of write off certain brands of ink. You know, people that do pen repair for a living, and then they'll kind of swear off a certain brand or two. You know, I think there's some merit to what they're saying, just because, you know, I respect most of the professionals in the business, not naming any specific names here, but, you know, I think it's just something to be aware of in general, but it is, again, a generalization to say this whole brand of ink should not be used in this whole brand of pens. That's a big generalization, a blanket statement, and has not been something that at least I have seen as a retailer, an official retailer of a lot of different boutique brands of ink and a lot of different pens. I have not seen like widespread pervasive issues of pretty much any ink in any pen. So not to say that there aren't some complications that can happen and certain things that don't play nicely together. Certain pens may get stained a little bit more with certain specific inks than others, but I haven't seen, you know, massive pen melting and eating away and stuff like that. Maybe that's something that happens over time, and I've been in this business for 7.5 years. Maybe it takes longer than that for some of this stuff to happen. That could be. But I have not seen it as a major, massive, pervasive issue, something that you should be like fearful of necessarily. That said, please don't go ruin your stuff and then tell me that I caused you to do it. So I'll give myself a little bit of a disclaimer there. But in general, I think the vast majority of fountain pen inks that are around and made today are going to work in the vast majority of pens. The possible exception being some vintage pens, especially ones that have sacks, you know, that have rubber latex sacks. I see more complications with those, whatever the sack material is. Some of the boutique inks don't play so nicely with those and can eat through them and melt them and stuff like that over time. So that is where I've seen most of the complication coming from. But other than that, I think you have, you know, a permission to experiment a little bit, just as long as you know, do a little research and exercise some caution with whatever it is that you're doing. I think that's half the fun, is getting to try new stuff anyway. All right, this question is from Cynthia B on Facebook. After watching quite a few of Brian's videos, I now have an irrational fear of Noodler's Baystate Blue ink. Every time Brian mentions Baystate Blue in a video, it's because of an issue that the ink could cause with whatever he's demonstrating. The ink can stain, it's hard to clean, you have to use bleach to clean it out, don't mix it with other inks, etc. If Baystate Blue is so amazingly complicated, what are the properties of this ink that would make people want to use it despite its many complications? Fair enough, fair enough. And honestly, you know, I've talked about it, and I think that even taking this question again is sort of propagating an irrational fear, but I think the thing that stamps out fear is knowledge, right, and education. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of education around Baystate Blue today. I'm even going to show you how I clean it out, because I've talked about it conceptually, but never really shown you. So I inked up a couple of pens. Now, granted, I only prepped these questions last night, so I inked up these pens earlier today, so they're not like uber super stained here. And in fact, I used a Noodler's clear Ahab here, and it's not even staining at all at this point. It's just like sliding off the pen, and so I was a little bummed about that. You know, so I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna use a different pen material, different plastic, and see if I can get more of a stained effect. So this is gonna be somewhat demonstrative, that sounds weird. Somewhat demonstratable, but also keep in mind I've not had it in here for like months, so the longer you have the ink in here, the more potential there could be for staining and things like that. So anyway, with that in mind. So I have, you know, a couple different pens, and I'll show you why people like Baystate Blue. Honestly, the only reason that I know that anyone likes Baystate Blue is because of the vibrancy of the color. It's a blue that's very electric. It just pops. And I'll try to zoom in and give you a little bit of an idea. I don't know how much it'll really come across the page. Actually, you know, it doesn't match it's not too far off from my shirt. It's got a little bit of purple to it, but you can see there, so it's a little bit wet still. It does dry relatively quickly. It is pretty absorbent, so it'll feather a little bit on the page, especially when you flex it out like this. Like, this is on rhodia paper, and it's even getting a little bit of spread coming out here. It's not terrible, but it's, you know, this is on rhodia paper, which is some pretty good stuff. It's because I dumped it on and there's lots of flex. So it's the vibrancy. That's the reason people like it. It just pops off the page. It's not, you know, waterproof. It's not, you know, permanent or anything like that. It's just, it's an overall just a very vibrant blue that's difficult to get with pretty much any other blue color. Now, there's other ones that will come close, so I think there's some good alternatives out there. Jérôme Éclat de Saphir is not too bad. There's a bunch of other ones. There's actually a bunch of blues that have come out recently, even with some of the new, like, Monteverde colors and Robert Oster's and some of the newer brands that we've been kind of carrying and expanding into. There's some pretty decent, adequate substitutes here, but there's nothing that's just quite as vibrant as this Baystate Blue. And usually you have to use it and you have to kind of see it in person. It doesn't come across well in video here, and I know that. That's why I'm not spending a lot of time showing it to you. But you lose some of that vibrancy just because it cannot be replicated in digital form. But it is quite jumping off the page. So that said, the thing that's different about Baystate Blue is it is formulated very differently. It has a higher pH, and it says it right on the bottle, approximately 8 to 9 pH range. So it's a higher pH, and what happens, most other ink is either neutral or leans pretty acidic, and if you mix this with a conventional ink, a non-Baystate ink, it's not just the pH, there's other chemicals going on in there that affect it, but it's all proprietary, so I don't know what it is, but I know that if you do mix it, it can actually solidify and gel and foam up and do some kind of crazy reactions and stuff to conventional inks. In fact, I wonder if I could even make that happen. This is an experiment. I've literally never intentionally tried to make it happen, but I have a couple of inks here. I have Diamine Ancient Copper and Jeroboam Amber di Bermani. So I'm going to experiment and sacrifice a couple of different inks. So we'll see if over the course of this Q&A if I can get some kind of reaction to happen. But I'm going to take a little bit of Baystate Blue and I'm going to drop it into here. So I'm going to do a little bit of Ancient Copper. I hope I get some kind of crazy reaction. That'd be some good entertainment, wouldn't it? And then a little Jeroboam. There you go. So I did about a 50-50 ratio on the Jeroboam. Maybe I'll do a little bit more on the Ancient Copper. Okay, so we'll see what I can get going on there. But in general, you don't want to do what I'm doing right now. And then try to use it in your pen. It's got a good smell to it too. So I'm going to close it up. So we'll see what I can get going on there. Should be interesting. So I've got those two. I'll let them kind of brew a little bit. It'd be cool if I could get some kind of crazy reaction. That'd be kind of fun. Ooh, that looks gross. Ooh, that is already looking pretty weird. It's like getting kind of chunky. Oh yeah, okay. I'll zoom in on that in a second, but that is looking good already. I'm liking that reaction I'm getting. Yeah, maybe I can get something similar with Ancient Copper. Anywho, so I'll set those aside and revisit them in a hot second. But the thing about the Baystate Blue, so what I really wanted to do is ink up with these pens and show you how to actually clean it out. So I have a little demonstration for you today. So I have a jar of conventional household water. I have some Clorox splashless clean linen bleach with improved whitening, which is really important here. No, it's just conventional household bleach. I like the splashless kind because I have kids and I don't want to splash bleach over places where they could get. So I use that, but I don't think it particularly matters what type of bleach, just a conventional household bleach. So what I like to do when I am cleaning out my pen with Baystate Blue is I like to use a ratio of between 10 and 25% bleach and water. So, 75 to 90% water, 10 25%, whatever, you know, depending on which ratio you use, somewhere around there, around a 10-to-1 solution, maybe a little bit more if it's really bad. I'll probably stick more to the 10-to-1 today. It depends on how aggressive you want to get cleaning with it. But that really is going to do it. Bleach is not inherently going to cause a lot of problems with your pens unless you're using a wood pen or you have certain other materials. You do some research on whatever your pen material is and see if bleach is going to be a problem. Generally speaking, it's not, unless you're going to soak it for a long time. That's generally not a great idea, but it, you know, sometimes that's what you need to do to get the job done. But in this case, I'm actually going to dump out the excess Baystate blue in my jar because I just filled it up this morning, and you know, that's going to kind of a 2-in-1 question here. People ask, can you dump the ink back in your bottle? Yes, you can do that. Okay, it does have a distinct smell, which I actually really like. So what I have here now is some Baystate blue inside my thing. So I'm going to just kind of wash it out, just like regular. Oh boy. I usually do this at my sink, so I hope I can be able to do this easily. Okay, I'm definitely going to get my fingers all blue. Can you see what I'm doing okay? Okay, that's good. So I will try to dump a little bit out. So what I'm doing now is I'm just cleaning out just the regular stuff, just the regular ink, so you can see if it's actually stained at all. And you can definitely see I've got kind of a blue tinge, which is good. I actually want that in this case, because I want to have a stained pen barrel to show you how to clean it, okay? So I'm gonna shake it out. Now if I was doing this at the sink, I would just be dumping this out and getting clean water. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm dumping it back into here, which is fine. You can do that too. So what I have going on here now is, okay, that's not bad. So I have a blue tinted ink barrel. See that? You see how blue that is? If I hold up against my shirt, you can see it's definitely got a tinge of blue. Okay, so you can rinse this out and rinse this out and rinse this out with water. It's not going to touch it. It's not going to change. What you need to do is you need to get some bleach. And now normally I would use clean water for this. It's got a little bit of blue to it, but I don't think that's going to cause a massive problem. Is it going to cause a problem? That's not a good question. Actually, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call an audible on myself here. I'm going to use just a small cup and just use some regular water. So now I have this jar that I prepared that is basically useless. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. What I'm going to do, again, normally at a sink, I'm going to take and I'm just going to use my cup of water here, and I'm going to fill it so much. And I'm just going to put a little bit of bleach in there to get that kind of 10-to-1 ratio going on. And then I'm going to immediately wipe it off my desk so I don't stain my desk. Okay, we're okay. As long as you catch it pretty quickly, it's not going to do too much harm. If you do it on bare wood, that's not a good problem to have. Okay, and then what I'm going to do to actually kind of control this a little bit better. Doing this on a wood desk is the least ideal of all solutions. So I literally have a solution here that has bleach and water. I'm just going to mix it up a little bit by kind of sucking it up into my syringe and getting it down. There's other ways that you can do it. Just a spoon. You can use probably the pen barrel itself, honestly. But just mixing it up so that the bleach and the water mix together nicely. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm just going to inject a little bit down into my pen barrel. Now one thing I could do is I could just leave it kind of sitting here for a while. That's certainly a viable option. Set that aside. But I'm just going to cover it. If you're sensitive to bleach or anything, you know, by all means use gloves. I am only going to do this for a couple of seconds here. So, so you can shake it back and forth like this, get it moving in here. You can also, you know, just take and fill the whole thing and kind of set it aside for a little bit. That also helps. And in fact, I'm going to fill it a little bit more so that I get good contact. I hope I put enough bleach in here to actually show it in the demo. That was my biggest fear by doing this live demo, because I did not test this out a lot ahead of time. So you can do this, you can let it soak. If it's not getting it, you can put a little bit higher concentration of bleach in there. Again, I went on kind of the low end. And another thing that you can do to kind of accelerate it a little bit is you can use a Q-tip. And you can kind of go in here and just scrub it a little bit. And that is actually probably going to be the most helpful thing. You can see even there, I'm getting some blue on the Q-tip. Kind of swirl that around. and you can kind of scrub it out. So this is not something you're going to want to have to do on every single pen that you use. So what Nathan says at Noodlers, if you're using Baystate Blue, you know, is it's really best to just dedicate a pen to it, because then you can clean it out, but it's not going to be necessarily a fun process because it takes a little while. Let me see how I'm doing here. Okay, still got a little bit of a blue tinge to it. Can you see that? A little bit there. But again, I've not cleaned this out very much. Can you see that compared to my white shirt? Can you see that? It's kind of picking up a little bit of the blue. Okay, maybe not the best visual demonstration, but I can still see a little bit of a blue tinge, but it's definitely gotten a whole heck of a lot better. I think if I, in fact, I'm going to leave this filled with this ink and kind of set it aside for just a few minutes and see if I can have it looking even better, maybe by the end of this Q&A. But that's basically the process. So it takes a second. You know, it's definitely not something you are used to having to do with most of your other pens. So it's really not so much something you should be afraid of. It's just kind of a pain. So if you're going to be switching Baystate Blue in between a lot of your different pens, it's really kind of annoying to do that. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you go sticking it in every single one of your pens. In fact, now I can see that has gotten a whole heck of a lot clearer. It's not nearly as blue. I'll leave that sitting in there, but that's basically the process. It's nothing amazingly complicated. The thing I will say is if you're going to be soaking anything with bleach like this, you want to make sure that you're not doing anything where bleach is you know, going to cause it any harm. And stainless steel is one of those things where if bleach is on it for a prolonged period of time, it can actually corrode it a little bit. So you want to be careful, especially if you have a pen with a stainless steel nib. You want to remove the nib before you soak the pen for any length of time. I would say length of time being like, you know, 20-30 minutes or more. You know, it's okay to just wipe it or to flush it out with a bleach solution like this, but you're not going to want to leave it soaking in there, and you definitely don't want to use like straight bleach. That's going to be too intense. You want to dilute it quite a bit, and I think that you're going to be a-okay if you kind of stick to those rules. So that is my answer about Baystate Blue. I want to make sure I just hit everything here. But yeah, pretty much that's it. It's just a vibrant blue that's a little bit of a hassle to clean out. Now let's revisit the inks that mixed up here. So my Amber de Bermani, let me zoom in so you can see what it looks like. And in fact, I zoomed up a little, I rigged up a little rig. Thank you, Jenny, for helping me brainstorm this thing, but I have this little rig. Ta-da! So now when I zoom in, you can not see my teeth and my stubble. So if you're looking at my Amber de Bermani, you can see how like gritty and kind of chunky it's looking now. This is literally after like a few minutes inside here. So this is the kind of thing that is not good for fountain pens. Just imagine if that was inside your pen. It would not be very pretty. So Amber de Bermani and Baystate Blue is a fail as far as ancient copper goes. Trying to get a picture of it. I actually can't see the vial itself, but I'm looking at it behind this thing and looking at it in my monitor, but it's looking not great. Let me open this thing up. Oh, there's my mouth. Okay, get a closer look at this. Oh yeah, it's doing the same kind of thing. It's like this gritty, kind of chunky nastiness, and I think if I leave it in here even longer over time, it's going to kind of, it's probably going to get relatively solid over a period of time. In fact, I'm just going to leave it sitting like this and kind of experiment and see, but I can just tell right now that this doesn't look good. So a little experiment there. You do not want to mix it with your pen. So the moral of the story here is if you're going to use Baystate, it's really best to dedicate it to an individual pen. Something like a Platinum Preppy, or maybe, you know, something like that. Maybe not the Ahab because it puts down a little too much ink, but I think that's going to pretty much be what you're going to want to do. And then to kind of wrap up the question here, you know, I could leave that soaking even longer if I wanted to, but just to give you a little bit of an idea of how it cleans out. That's what happens when you do live demos. Everything takes a lot longer than you think it does. That's why we love editing. Because it can pass time and do all the boring stuff that you don't want to sit here and just listen to me say filler talk, but now you are, because this is Q&A and this is how we do it. All right, there we go. That actually looks quite good. I don't see a blue tinge to it. You know, I got just a tiny little hint of blue on the paper towel here when I put that in there, but I have now a clear barrel. So took us a little bit to get there. I probably could have used a stronger bleach solution, but even still, even with a relatively weak one, I now have a perfectly clear barrel. So even when you have a stained barrel, you can clean it out with the magic of bleach. All right, onward and upward, shall we? I'll clean all that up later. All right, this question is a troubleshooting question from reed.thoughts on Instagram. I have different piston fillers which include Mont Blanc, Twisby, and others, but it seems sometimes ink gets past the piston's seal. How can I remedy this? Not how to clean it, but how to prevent this from happening at all. Well, I don't know how you even know if you got ink past your Mont Blanc seal. I've got a Mont Blanc 149 right here, and it's a pretty opaque pen. It has an ink window, but I guess if I move the piston all the way down, I could sort of maybe see if there was ink behind the seal, but frankly, I don't really care. You know, as long as the pen's filling and all that, unless you have so much ink that's behind the seal that where it's like literally leaking out of the back of the pen, I don't think you really need to worry about it that much, honestly, unless it's a visual thing. Unless you have like a demonstrator pen and it's an aesthetic thing and you see ink behind there and it just really bothers you, then I could see where that would be annoying. You know, for example, I have a Twisby Eco here. If I have the Eco and I have some ink behind the piston seal, I could see where that would get kind of annoying. That's a lot less common, I hear, happening on something like a Twisby because it has what's called a double-walled O-ring. So I'm going to bring my handy-dandy display module over here. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to show you the Eco, and I'm going to show you how I disassemble it. This should be interesting because I now have this giant board in front of my face. But let's see. So you can see here, what I mean by a double-walled O-ring is there's a first wall, there's a second wall, 2 walls. So there's actually, it's like having 2 seals on here. So you don't necessarily run into the same issue on something like a Twisby Eco, for example, like you would on some other pens that maybe just have a single walled O-ring. So I'm going to now remove the piston seal out of the back of the Eco and show you in a little more detail what I'm talking about. So you see here, this is the actual O-ring seal itself. It's not technically just an O-ring, it's a piston seal. But it has these 2 bumps, and let me zoom in a little bit so you can see even more what I'm talking about. But it has these 2 bumps right here. Bump 1, bump 2. And if I can catch it in the light right, you can see even better. So these 2 parts that stick out a little bit are what create the seal on the piston. And so if you want to help to prevent ink from getting back there, the reason that it's getting back there is because these seals are not making a tight seal along the inside of the body. So if they're making a tight seal, then you can see it's a nice even ring that goes all the way around the pen. Like this one's doing a pretty good seal. Over time, you know, the rubber could break down, the rubber could, you know, warp or something like that, and you could run into, so you can see right there, like the first one's grabbed, and the second one will once it gets to a point there, boom. So now I've got both ones making contact. Once it's not making contact anymore, it loses kind of that ring. Isn't that cool? So if you have it when it's not making full contact, you'll end up with something like this. If you look on this back seal right here, it'll end up being like thick on one side and then not present on the other. That's where ink can get behind there. But if you have a nice thick ring that goes all the way around, if you have a demonstrator and you can even see what's going on, then you know you're okay. But the thing that you can do, basically the one preventative thing you can do is you can either replace the O-ring if it's faulty. That's not so straightforward, especially if you run into like warranty issues in a company like Mont Blanc. It's not going to be easy to do necessarily. But I have some silicone grease here. So if you take a little bit of silicone grease, this is super zoomed in and very awkward because I'm like behind this thing here. You guys give me feedback either whether this is more awkward or whether it's more awkward looking at my mouth in the background. So I can take this and just smear it all around. And this is good maintenance to do just in general. You don't need to gob it on there. But a little bit of grease, it's going to help to seal it up. So it's going to not have it be where it will cause problems with the leaking like you are talking about. But it's also just going to help it to move smoother. So put it in there like that. Voila. Got my wrench stuck. There we go. And then it's going to move beautifully. And that is the preventative thing that you're going to be able to do to keep your ink from getting back behind your seal. Cool? We'll have to see. Give me feedback on this thing, whether that helps or not. I'm definitely getting used to it, but if it really helps you visually, that's what I care about more. All right. Where am I? All right, I'm going to close out with a couple of business questions. So a little less on the demo of the products and a little more just talking business. Shall we? This is a question from the Pen Penchant on YouTube. Hello, Brian and crew. First of all, thanks for all the wonderful work you do for the fountain pen community. It's been a pleasure to see your business grow before our very eyes over the years. Well, that is really sweet. Thank you. I appreciate that very much, and I know my team does too. They work very hard for us here. All right, my question for you is, what would you like to see in fountain pen review content? Anything you're not seeing but would like to? Thanks, and keep up the fantastic work. So this is an interesting question. I don't believe I've ever been asked this before, which is surprising with some 2,000 different questions that I've answered at this point. So, for me, this is kind of a personal question because I produce reviews. So, if there was something that I would want to see in a review, I really should be doing it. Now, that's not always possible, but that has certainly been what's inspired me doing these reviews in the first place, is because there weren't a lot of video reviews out there when I first started doing this back in 2010. Really is the first pen reviews I started to do. And so it was for that lack of having access to them and having interest in wanting to do them that is the reason I started doing it in the first place. So a lot of what's evolved over the years with me doing this stuff has been things that I've wanted to see myself. So there's a lot of that in there. So I could just talk about the way I do reviews, but things that I personally like out of them. I don't watch a lot of pen reviews, just because partly is my time, and if I have time, I'm going to play with pens and make reviews rather than watch somebody else's, but I do watch some here and there. So some of the things that I like is, let's see here, I wrote them all down so I didn't forget them all. I like comparisons. I like when, for example, I get a lot of questions about like the TWSBI Eco versus the 580. Okay, so being able to compare some of the details and not just technical specifications, but really having someone interpret and provide feedback about like the meaning behind the differences. That I really appreciate, because I could look at the pen measurements and see, okay, the diameter is 0.38 instead of 0.41. Does that even matter? And having somebody to kind of interpret that is what I really like a lot. So comparisons, but with kind of some meaning behind them. They're very difficult to produce because you basically have to be an expert on two completely different things and then talk about their differences. So it requires a lot to be able to put that together. I like watching like close-up details, macro stuff. I love being able to see like fine details of things. So I appreciate that, especially in like a video review. I don't need heavy technical specs. That's something I can look at on a product page or, reading maybe a written blog or something like that. If I'm, which I guess your question was kind of open-ended to just fountain pen content. But I guess I'm interpreting it as video just because this is a video format here. But I guess it could be anything. It doesn't have to be video. I like to see close-ups, details. I'm a very visual person, so I like to see visual representations of things more than just, technical facts kind of spelled out. I don't need a lot of data thrown at me, but I like some generalized assessments of those facts. I don't need to know exactly the overall length of a certain pen. For me personally, that doesn't matter quite as much. But it is good to know, hey, this pen is a little front-weighted. So this is going to be better if you tend to hold your pen, closer up on the nib than if you hold it further back. That's like an interpretive thing that I really appreciate in a review. Overviews are really good. That's you know, how, you know, just overall kind of the big picture stuff is really helpful for me. How it kind of stacks up against similar things, comparable products, not necessarily direct comparisons, but relating it to other things that maybe I'm familiar with, especially if it's a pen that I've never seen before, I'm interested to know. You know, it's like this new pen comes out. Oh my gosh, this pen is crazy. It's never like anything I've seen. Oh, it's actually very similar in size to this one. Ah, I have that pen, so I can imagine what it's like. So I like that kind of stuff. You know, pros and cons, kind of pointing out the best parts and pointing out the worst parts, not really talking about the things that are kind of mediocre, but just really going on the extremes. Find those to be valuable. And then if you can do all of that, then layering it with some entertainment. You know, I love puns, clever like inside jokes and pen humor, genuine enthusiasm and passion really just is kind of everything too. So a lot of that, you know, is very difficult to do and kind of hard to stack up, but I think those who are around that have done a good number of reviews have a lot of these components to them, and I think a lot of you kind of feel the same way as I do about these things. So, but yeah, I'd love to know anything that you kind of feel the same way. I get a lot of feedback on the reviews I do and stuff all the time, but if you have any additional thoughts, be sure to throw them in the comments. I do need to make a phone call with somebody in like 2 minutes, so I'm actually gonna have to wrap this up a little bit here, but I have one more question. This is from Matthew Beddow on YouTube. Recently, I've been discussing the future of fountain pens with a reviewer, Larry Barones, and a question that came out of that discussion was, do you have any metrics to measure the age of people purchasing pens and ink? Obviously, this is very important to know if you're going to project sales over a long period, because if the data suggested that it was mostly older people as a percentage, then eventually the sale will decline without being morbid as these older people get too old, it's a long question, to write or pass on. I am concerned, as many of us are, that the fountain pen may decline and possibly disappear if the market shrinks. If you could answer that one, I'd love to understand what you currently do measure and what your thoughts are. So, how big brother am I getting on you here, right, is a good question. So that's one way to interpret it. I don't have a lot of data, and I definitely don't have like individual data. There's definitely some metric stuff out there that Google collects that other metric companies may be able to get, because basically if you're on the internet, I hate to break it to you, but if you're on the internet, information is being collected about your habits. And those of you who are like super paranoid about that, you probably have things in place to scrub all of your computers and watch out for that stuff. For the most part though, most of us have most of what we're doing tracked and at least conglomerated into some kind of data that a lot of larger companies use to really data mine and understand you as the consumer better, partly to serve you better, partly to really try to get you to buy more things more efficiently, right? Like that's why a lot of companies are in business. I don't really take that approach to it. You know, I don't ignore data, but at the same time, I wasn't driven to get into the fountain pen business by collecting data and trying to squeeze as much money out of people as I possibly could. So that's not where I'm coming from with it. But in general, I resonate with the spirit of your question here, which is, seems that there's a lot of, you know, higher aged, more life experienced folks that are into the fountain pen thing. If we are not teaching any younger folks or any new people to get into fountain pens, eventually those who grew up with using them in school and stuff like that are going to not have a need to write anymore for one reason or another, and well, basically the industry will shrink away. That's kind of a separate issue than just like being replaced by ballpoints or technology or something like that. It's literally like if there's not new people getting into the hobby, it will just kind of fall by the wayside. I think what has leveled the playing field for that thinking, I think there was a lot of that thinking going on 10, 15 years ago. A lot of fountain pen industry folks were getting very concerned about the future of the fountain pen industry. I think the rise of the internet and social media, e-commerce, you know, has really helped with that in the fountain pen industry, because there are just not a lot of brick and mortar stores around, especially in the US. And being able to share information like we're doing right now, literally, is reviving a lot of that in the US. So I am very optimistic, actually, because I think that there's a huge opportunity. And if there's growth of my company has been any indication, it's because I've leaned hard and heavy into that. Let's teach new people how to use fountain pens. if we do it well and we service everybody well, we'll have existing fountain pen people that will also love what we do. But I'm going to focus a lot of time and effort on getting people into fountain pens who previously knew nothing about them. So we're heavy on the education, heavy on the service and troubleshooting and the high touch experience for exactly that reason. And while I won't share any like specific data and stuff, because that's frankly it's proprietary, and you know, I don't want to, you know, make you think that I'm tracking you more than I really am, quite honestly, but I can say that you probably would be surprised, or maybe not, to know that it's not just a bunch of retirees and people who used fountain pens in school 45 years ago who are shopping, at least with me. We have a lot of younger folks. We're very heavy in the social media, and the vast majority of our customers are working professionals. You know, some people are starting out in their career, some people are more sunsetting on their careers, but a lot of people are just good old folks using pens at work, and that's the vast majority of our customer base. So I think, you know, as time goes on, we're going to continue to do that. So I am not very concerned about, like, 10 years from now, will there even be a Goulet pen company anymore because everybody will have aged out. I'm not very concerned about that at all, because we have such a hard shift and hard focus towards the younger folks getting into it. But hopefully that gives you some insight and answers your question, at least to some degree of satisfaction. To wrap it up for this week, I have a question of the week for you, and this has absolutely nothing to do with any of the questions that I talked about here. Well, maybe a little bit on the last one, but I'm curious to know, have you ever actively recruited someone into your fountain pen world? And who is that? You know, because I know there tends to be a very evangelistic kind of, you know, conversion type experience when you first get into fountain pens. I know I had that. It was like, where have these been all my life? Oh my gosh, if only I'd known. And of course, I've gone on to influence a lot of people to use fountain pens. But I'm curious to know if you have ever kind of really kind of advocated and gotten somebody into fountain pens out of your sheer passion for it, and kind of telling your story a little bit. That would just be kind of cool and inspirational to hear. Really no other reason than that to do that for the question of the week this week. But I hope you've enjoyed this Q&A. Hopefully this is adequate. I tried some new things, some demo, this board thing and all that, and so I'd love some feedback on how we did on 164. But I hope you've enjoyed this. Be sure to subscribe to all the subscribable things that we do, and I hope you've enjoyed this. Have a great week, a great rest of your next week as well. Great weekend, great rest of your week. What do I say? What's my tagline? I don't know. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed it, and right on.